Hello, and welcome to the SharePoint Framework and JavaScript Special Interest Group Biweekly Sync. It is February 11th, 2021. Very excited. We got a great meeting for everybody again today, and I am Patrick Rogers, your host for this call. We've got a great agenda, latest updates on SharePoint Framework, updates across all of the patterns and practices offerings, new community samples updates. We'll do our optional picture time and together mode, which is great fun, and then 3 outstanding demos from Hugo, Magnus, and Perry on React Webpart to group document based on metadata using Aurelia in SharePoint Framework, and then generic feedback form with a right side panel and some email capabilities. So 3 cool demos, very excited to see those. All right, so often people ask for, how do I participate in the Patterns and Practices program or this call specifically? The best way to participate, and my favorite way for folks to participate, is demos. So if you have a demo you would like to do on the call, please reach out to myself or Vesa, and we will get you scheduled on an upcoming call. For this call, that can be really anything around client-side development, anything around SharePoint Framework, anything around any of the Pnp offerings, or, obviously there's tons of different SDKs and libraries out there in the world. So if you have, other stuff you've built, doesn't have to be exclusively Pnp. Would love to have you demo that on the call. Just reach out to us. As always, you can also contribute on GitHub, so reporting issues, submitting pull requests, or helping out with issues or questions. So if somebody has an issue and a question, you happen to know the answer, would love to get you jumping in there and helping them out, because that will very much help them get their answers faster. Finally, absolutely provide feedback to all of us on how the calls are going, documentation needs, where we can help, how we can help, and positive feedback is okay too, of course, because we can always do a little bit more of the things you like. Up next is our Pageo links. So we've got links there to our developer videos, which are generally task-focused, topic-focused videos on how to do developer-oriented tasks. So it might be authentication-related, provisioning-related, how to build your first SharePoint Framework project, things like that. Check those out. We've got the Pnp videos, which is all of our community recordings. So this call, our general dev call, our monthly calls, as well as many other of our community events. You can find all the recordings there. As well, we've got a bunch of different open source organizations in GitHub. So SharePoint, Pnp, Office Dev, and Microsoft Graph. All of those invite you to contribute, provide feedback, report issues, and encourage you to get involved in any and all of those that might interest you. Sample galleries, we've got tons of great samples. So Spfx web parts, extensions, list formatting, and Teams samples. So certainly check those out, and we can build on those and develop those further. And we will continue to see great work come into those and really enhance things there. So open source initiatives and samples, aka.ms/m365pnp is the one link you really need to remember that will connect you out to all the rest of the samples and guidance. So I encourage you to check that out. And finally, there is a SharePoint Framework link there for all the SPFX documentation, aka.ms/SPFX. And with that, I'll hand things over to David for sharing his caring updates.
Awesome. Thank you, Patrick. Well, friends, the Patterns and Practices community, as we know, is an open source and completely inclusive community. So we invite everyone who would like to contribute around the tools and resources that we have to do so. But we also know that you might just want to use those resources and tools. And of course, we also know that sometimes just using them comes with a certain degree of barrier. And so the Sharing is Caring initiative is here to kind of lower those barriers, help you get over them and start using and contributing back to the community. We have a variety of sessions. I'm not going to run through every one because it's starting to grow, but we are excited about what we have in store for March. We're going to have a couple of new sessions that we've been working on as a team, more than code with VS Code. So if you're a maker, a documenter, a creator, a power addict, we're going to show how you can utilize VS Code for all those tools that you like to use, as well as a first-time presenter session. So if you would like to get more involved with showing demos, but you're a little nervous about the requirements and the skills needed, we're going to cover all of that to give you the confidence you need. We want to welcome Emily Mancini to the team. Super excited. The team's growing with myself, Hugo, and April Dunham as well. And Emily is now joining us. A fantastic team. And then lastly, but not leastly, right after this call, we're going to have an Ask Me Anything with the Pnp Js team. Right after this call, if you go to the aka.ms Sharing is Caring, go to the sessions. It is the first session listed, and there will be a direct Teams link. So all you need to do is click it and join, and we'll all be there to collaborate together. So look forward to seeing everyone there. Patrick, back to you.
Thank you for that update, David. And do definitely invite everybody, if you can make it, to Ask Me Anything. Very excited to take everybody's questions, and apologies for the bit of the reschedule that was on me. And with that, we'll hand things over to Vesa for our SharePoint Framework update.
Excellent. Thank you, Patrick. A few slides in here. The first one is really around the future things. So just to be clear, we announced the Viva product series last Thursday. So AKMS MS/Viva is where you can get more information around that. And one of the most interesting thing is here is absolutely the Viva connections. So Viva connection is something which can be extended using the Teams extensibility and SharePoint framework to your needs. So basically what you're seeing here is just few preview pictures related on the Viva connections directly exposed in the Microsoft Teams. And just to be super clear, it is up to the partner and customer or the architect to define what is being presented in there. So you have a full control on what is the Viva connections experience. And for the partners, you can actually include your own extensibility and customizations as part of this as well. So in certain level, it is the portal app which we announced in Ignite 2020, but it's much more than that. So it's enhanced and there will be additional capabilities. We will provide additional details on this one as the spring continues. This is just a quick recap on the roadmap for for SPFX in general. So 1.12 is coming relatively soon. We are almost talking about days rather than weeks, which is pretty cool. So as long as we get the documentation and all of the tests completed, and that will then include, for example, the meeting support for creating Microsoft Teams meeting apps and a few other things as well. So a lot of cool stuff there. We're looking into actually releasing 1.13 and 1.14 during the spring as well, with new capabilities targeted for Viva connections as well. So there's a lot of new opportunities with SharePoint Framework targeting not only SharePoint, but also Microsoft Teams. But Patrick, let me throw it back to you.
Thank you, Vesa. And I will take it and throw it over to Julie Turner for our Pnp Js client-side library updates.
Thank you, Patrick. So we had a big release of 2.1.0 in January, and we were a little nervous. We hoped that nothing would go wrong, and we only had some small issues that we needed to fix. So the 2.1.1 patch was released on February 1st, which fixed an issue with global headers. It also fixed for client-side pages like and unlike feature and a proxy code fix. So those fixes went out in that patch, and then scheduled for February 12th, will be the 2.2.0 release. We're definitely going to have a default column values fix for the taxonomy field type, and the get all children as ordered tree custom sort order bug fix will be in that drop as well. We'd like to also announce that we will be posting soon a V3 planning issue and discussion issue. So what will happen is we'll have one issue posted that will be a planning issue that will have the outline of all the things that we are going to try to tackle in V3, and we'll lock that issue as sort of a table of contents, and then we'll have for each of the issues a discussion issue where you can go and give your thoughts on that issue, some feedback, ideas that you might have regarding that particular thing, and we'll discuss it back and forth so that we can start really moving on our V3 plans. As always, please direct all your feedback to the issues list and follow us, M365 Pnp Js on Twitter. Thank you. And back to you, Patrick.
Thank you for those great updates, Julie. And next, the CLI for Microsoft 365. So released v3.5 with converting files to PDF using the graph, sending adaptive cards, creating Azure AD apps, and so much more. Be sure to check out the CLI. It is a great tool in your toolkit. npm install -g at pnp/cli-Microsoft 365 at latest, and it is now available natively in the Azure Cloud Shell. So a great way, cross-platform, to manage your tenant, your projects. Really can help script a lot of things, do a lot of setup tasks for you, and continues to expand. Seeing tons and tons of great community involvement in the CLI, and so that is a great place if you're looking to jump in to get started. It's very easy to hop in and build a single, what I call a command, a CLI command. So it's easy to just sort of focus on that piece of work and not necessarily have to learn the entire thing. So very cool to see so much work going into the CLI and that continue to evolve. So great work to everybody on that. And now the reusable components. So React controls 2.4.0, accessible accordion control, placeholder, people picker, taxonomy picker, list picker, updates for all of those, as well as a bunch of bug fixes. Those, of course, are the controls designed to be used in the body of your Webpart or SharePoint application customizer. And those will appear with a very nice out-of-the-box styling and will let you really get a jump start on your development by using these controls and dropping them right in and leveraging that power. React property controls 2.3.0. These are controls designed to be used in the edit pane of your web parts. And property field icon picker, field term picker, and field list picker have all gotten either some additions or updates there. So as well, great to see all the folks contributing here as well. It's another great place to get started and jump in. sp-dev-fx-property-controls and sp-dev-fx-controls-react will get you all the latest documentation on the reusable SPFX controls, as well as at M365 PNP controls on Twitter. Is a great thing to follow to make sure you have all the latest updates. And now the Yeoman generator. So at Pnp generator, 1.16 is the latest version. Angular 11 is now supported. Source maps for Angular. Thank you to Chandani for adding a lot of this Angular support. Very great to see that get dropped in as well. Other updates, updating the to the latest versions or near the latest versions of Pnp Js, Vue.js, Pnp controls and property controls. Fluent Ui Fabric 7 now supported, as well as a ton of other great features and updates there. Still working on upgrade and improvements for Vue.js, as well as Babylon.js support. npm install -g at pnp/generator-spfx. This is, of course, a Yeoman generator that will help build you a SharePoint Framework project, but using a lot of additional options that are not available in the out-of-the-box Yeoman generator. It does, however, use all the same stuff under the hood, so you end up with a quote-unquote real SharePoint Framework project with all the same Microsoft dependencies and base classes as you would using the Microsoft generator. So community generator, great way to get a ton of additional options and configurations for your SharePoint Framework projects. And with that, we will go to the modern search updates. aka.ms/pnp-search, build modern search experience with flexible web parts. So the idea here is you have a whole suite of web parts you can use to build out your search center. So doing bug fixes, and V4 was released on January 18th. And it is a breaking change, not backwards compatible at all. So you will have to update your search centers to use the new release. It does, of course, support the Graph Search and the SharePoint Search API. So you get some choices there in how you support your users. So check out the modern search for sure. And finally, SPFX samples for Hugo.
Thank you, Patrick. So the SPFX sample repositories are two repositories that we use to share cool extensions and web parts. The code is available for you to learn from, and these are the new samples for the last 2 weeks. We have a new list search web part sample by Alberto Gutierrez. It's a full feature web part that actually allows you to create a search interface, and it allows dynamic connections. We have an update to the list form, which now actually fixes the drag and drop support for reorganizing the field by Kman 1131. Oh, that's funny. That's what I was actually going to name my child. And then we have an update to the modern calendar by Ravi Chandra, who just updated it to SPFX 1.11. We don't have any new SPFX extension updates for the last 2 weeks, but I wanted to reach out to everyone and say there is an issue type called sample request. And so if you have any requests for samples, this is not a commitment from anyone in the community to say that we're going to make these samples for you. But if you have an idea for sample, or you need help with a sample and you're not sure how to get started, please do reach out to go to these repos and create a new sample request. And hopefully you're going to inspire someone in the community to help you. That's it for me. Back to you, Patrick.
Awesome. Thank you, Hugo. Great to see the continued work to build out these samples. And again, a great resource for folks getting started on a project to jump in and just find out what other people are doing to help solve some problems. And now, optional picture time. So if you're interested, turn on your camera, and Vesa will go ahead and get a picture time thing together here. See folks popping in there.
I'm already recording, so we can see whenever we hit the max 50 people, we can do some waving, and good to see a lot of familiar faces again on the call. I hope that we will see actually physically at some point.
And a lot of new faces too, so fantastic
a lot of new faces,
to see that.
absolutely, absolutely. Everybody waving, yay! Thanks, everybody. Hope we will share a GIF animation on this one again. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Let's stay in touch. Thank you for this.
And with that, we will go to the demos. First demo is Hugo. So if you want to go ahead and take over the presentation, we'll just jump right to that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Patrick. Thanks, everyone. My name is Hugo Bernier. I actually curate the SPFX sample repositories. And today I'll actually be presenting a new Webpart on behalf of Joao Mendes, who's on the call right now, and he's actually going to be helping in the chat with questions. But Joao is probably one of the most prolific contributors to the SPFX Webpart sample repositories. Joao is a senior Microsoft 365 architect / solution developer, and he typically builds really useful Webparts that look good and that are usually ready to use. Even though they're just intended to be a sample, they're usually ready for you to use. The Webpart that I'm showing you today is called List Item Menu Webpart, and it does exactly what the name says. It allows you to build menu items that are delivered from lists and documents. And like most of Joao's Webparts, the Webpart supports, theme background support. It actually works inside of Teams and lots of other cool functionality. But let's not talk about it. Let's demo something. All right, so this is actually a page that is coming from the SharePoint Lookbook. If you haven't used the SharePoint Lookbook, I strongly recommend it. I think it's lookbook.microsoft.com. And it allows you to provision really cool, professionally designed pages in SharePoint with some sample content. This is one of the ones that I believe this is the HR one. And you see there's lots of cool content. One of the things that it has in the Webpart itself is something like this that says, oh, here's some links to benefits, here's some links to career, here's some tools and things like that. And as cool as this looks, these links are all manually curated, right? They're not directly connected to a document. If you want to point to a document, then you have to actually create the link yourself. However, Joao actually came up with a Webpart that takes care of this. So if you go to my libraries behind the scene here, I have a HR policy library that I created, and let's click on it. And I created 3 documents here, transitioning to work, travel policy, and work from home policy. And I also created a category that allows me to group these documents. I also created another library called recruitment, where I put some samples like long resume template, short resume template, standard application template, standard offer. And then if I go to a blank page here and I just kind of edit the page, and hopefully if the demo gods are with me here, I should find Joao's Webpart, list menu documents. There you go. And again, like most Webparts that Joao builds, the start experience is always great. It doesn't start broken. It actually tries to suggest something for you. But if I click on edit and I say select the document library, and I'll just say select HR policies here. And I want to group by category. And if I click apply, what we should see is automatically, I now have kind of a menu that gets built that automatically creates the list of documents that are available from that library. So I'll just do another example of this super quickly, and then we'll go back to showing the code. List menu document. I'll click on a different library here. Which one was the other one that I said? Recruitment. Recruitment. It works better when you spell right. And category. And so it's actually finding the documents grouped by category. And again, oh, I didn't, there you go. And again, if we go back to these documents that I had created, you see all the documents that are listed here are actually the documents that show up in this Webpart. Now, of course, I'm not a designer. I didn't design a beautiful page like Joao did in his screenshot, but it's a great way to get started by pulling content directly from a list. So let's look at the code, though. So there's a few points of interest in the code, and again, I could probably talk to death about the code, but I'm really going to try to focus on the important parts. The first thing to point out is that there's a list items menu Webpart. Now, most SPFX Webpart projects consist of or have at least one Webpart class, which is responsible for hosting the Webpart's Chrome, and that's kind of that invisible frame around the content. And it hosts the property pane, it stores and loads the properties, and it's also responsible for telling things to the content. For example, when the theme of the section changes, and that's something I forgot to show you, is that the Webpart is section aware. The imports at the top of the class is really what's responsible for telling the Webpart what kind of functionality we're going to be using. So for example, here, we're importing logic to understand about the read-only theme, the theme provider, and also how to handle events like the themes are changing. Another import here that's very useful is the Pnp Js library. The Pnp Js library, if you haven't used it, you should probably attend the Ask Me Anything session. I don't think we've mentioned it yet, but there's an Ask Me Anything session about Pnp Js right after this call. In this case, what the library will do is it's going to be responsible to make it super easy to call SharePoint APIs and or Graph APIs. And it will take care of things like automatically syntax completion, authentication, batching, caching, and all sorts of other things. So we'll use the Pnp Js library in this code later, and we'll retrieve things like documents and things like that. While we're on the topic of cool PnP libraries, one of the other things that you may notice is that we have a property pane that lists all the fields in the library. As you saw, that's how I picked the category field. And another one that selected the lists. And so those are actually controls that are available to you in the PnP reusable property control library. Now, we could have written our own code to do this and, overwritten the drag and drop control and retrieved all the columns in the list, show them in a drop down, all that stuff. But why would you do that when you have controls that are already built, that have already been tested and verified by the community? Focus on really the value added activities is really what we're trying to do here. Another control here that's used is the property field message, which allows you to scream at people when there's errors in a nice way, obviously. And we also have the property field spinner, which actually just does this. I think the property field spinner is the one that does the please wait. So if it's loading and it's actually taking longer, it's able to show a little display message for you. Again, the whole point is let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's leverage the logic that's already built and tested by other people so that we can do the cool stuff, like the stuff that Joao does. All right, so now one of the things that we need to do when we want to use Pnp Js, especially to call SharePoint library, is we just somewhere in the initialize web part, we want to call sp setup and pass the context of the Pnp Js. I'm actually kind of nervous to talk about Pnp Js when I have Patrick and Julie on the call. So we pass sp setup to set up the call, and while we're there, we also grab a pointer to the Microsoft Graph client so that we can make calls later. And I know I'm going quickly here. I'm trying to show as much of the code as possible. The other thing that we do is we grab a connection to the theme provider, and the theme provider is actually what tells the web part what theme is currently selected, so that if you change your background color or you change to dark mode, the web part will be aware of this. There's a call here called try get theme, which actually tries to get the theme and pass the theme variant to the web part. And we create a connection to the theme changed event so that the web part can react when there's a change. While we're on the topic of themes, we're also making provision if we're currently running inside the context of Microsoft Teams, we grab information about what theme color we're using. or we pass the default to themes. Try saying Teams theme 3 times fast. It's actually quite complicated. All right, and then the fun part, when we're ready to render the web part, we actually just call the list items menu component, and we pass all the information that we need for example, the titles, list ID, field name, what variant for the theme we want to use, and so on and so forth. Everything else, when it comes to rendering the web part, happens within the components itself. Again, we always encourage you to try to keep your functionality clear like that, so that you don't have to touch 17 places when you change your web part. You can really localize your changes in one place. Super quickly here, if I go to the list items menu component, you'll see that this is where all the rendering happens. But one of the things that I should point out is this is actually a React hook class. I guess it's a class, yeah. And so React Hook is a newer approach to actually doing React components, where it allows you to actually kind of create hooks or really function that extend the functionality of a component. And so you can encompass all that function in one place. So for example, Joao here wrapped all the logic to retrieve the list of documents in a library in something that he called useList. And then later in the code, Joao is able to make calls to the useList hook, for example, get group items, get group headers, get field. And so this is great because, again, all the logic for retrieving that data is in one place. And then the rest of the component is responsible for just rendering the results. So the results it got from the list, expanding, collecting group, keeping track of whether a group is expanded or collapsed. It's all mostly straightforward from there. So I'm going to skip the rendering part. I'm going to focus on really the impressive part, which is that useList component. useList hook. So the useList hook here is actually, again, importing the Pnp Js library to make it easy to retrieve stuff from SharePoint. And then the useList has, for example, a method called getListColumns. And what it does is it says, go to the SharePoint current site, get the lists, and then get the list that the person had selected by the list ID, and then get the fields that are not hidden, right? Hidden equals false. I know it sounds very simple when we look at it like this, but that's the whole point of the Pnp JS. Is it allows you to create this kind of code that's using kind of a fluent syntax, where you can just say something dot something dot something, and it's almost like you're writing a sentence more than trying to hard code a API call. So we do the same thing for getting the list of fields. Again, we do the same thing for getting the list of group headers, and I'm not spending the time to explain each one of them. And we have a big one that is responsible for getting all the group items. Finally, we have one last one that is responsible for getting the lists in the useList component, useList hook, sorry, I should say, which is responsible for returning all the lists that are available from a site. But as you can see, all the functionality to retrieve the SharePoint code is really cleanly located in one place. You know, I would bet that you can probably copy and paste the useList hook in your projects, and you'd be able to leverage it with very little modifications, and that allows you to really be able to do some cool stuff. Again, this was a super quick tour of Joao's code. Joao, I believe, is on the call. He's able to answer questions. I'll also be here to answer calls. The webpart is available at ak.ms/spfx-webparts. Just search for Joao as an author or look for the React list items menu webpart. Thank you, Joao, for your awesome contribution. And thank you, everyone, for giving me the opportunity to show you some really cool code. I look forward to the next contributions from Joao and everybody else. Thank you, everyone. Back to you, Patrick.
Awesome stuff. Thank you, Hugo. And Magnus, you are up next. If you want to go ahead and take over the presentation.
I'll share my screen. So first have a short overview of Aurelia, and then we'll look at the implementation specific for SPFX, which is part of the Pnp solution. And then after that, we'll look at Aurelia Fluent Ui, which is a a wrapper for the official Fluent UI from Microsoft, so it makes it easier to use within Aurelia. And to the right, you see the links to the version 1 of Aurelia and version 2, which is coming out in, like, I don't know if it's weeks or maybe just a month or two away. So there's a new version coming out which extends the functionality which we have in version 1. So very short about me. I work at Dunite, and that's my Twitter handle. I built the Spfx Aurelia tool, which is part of the human generator, and also the AU Fluent Ui npm package. And also that's in turn built also on top of the Aurelia React wrapper, so you can actually use that yourself to wrap any other React controls if you would like to. So that one is just specific for the Fluent UI. I'm also working on the human generator for Teams, a clean Teams add-in as well. And down here are the links for the source code for the AU Fluent UI and some demo examples on that too. I will have a short look at that later. So a brief introduction to Aurelia. It's my background is, like since I said, developing a SharePoint solution from 2003. So it's been ASP.NET Forms developer and C# developer, and have been lately forced into building like SPA solutions and client-side stuff. And I find Aurelia really easy to learn with that kind of background. It's very easy to if you have C#, MVC, ASP.NET Forms knowledge. Great performance, extensive ecosystem. So there's a lot of tools. There's plugins for Chrome, and there's a lot of plugins on NPM and gulp tasks and so on. Lots of CLI tools for Aurelia as well. You can use all the testing tools that you know, like Jest and Karma and whatever you like. It has a very, I think, easy to use reactive binding. We will have a look on specifically how that works. And it's very easy to create your own extensions as well. So if you find any part of the framework that you think lacks some functionality, it's very easy to extend. And the team that built the framework have put a lot of effort in that, working out proper conventions, so you don't have to put a lot of boilerplate code to get it to work. It just mostly works without any boilerplate code at all. But if you, for some reason, really want to put the boilerplate code there and make your own configuration, you can do that as well. And as I said earlier, the Aurelia version 2 is just around the corner, so I will update all the tooling I have made for the next generation of Aurelia as soon as it arrives. So first, just look at some binding code. So these are some HTML elements, and within Aurelia it's quite easy. You just put the dot notation after the HTML attribute you would like to bind. So in this case, for the input element, we have the value attribute, and we want to bind that to the first name property on our view model. So it's just easy that we enter a dot bind, and the Aurelia framework will automatically make, in this case, two-way binding because it's an input element. So if you use the dot bind notation, it will select the most proper binding depending on which kind of element you are binding on. If it's a span tag, for example, then there's no point of having a two-way binding because the user cannot enter any data. But the input element, the user can enter data, so then two-way binding works. If you want to be specific, you can be that as well. So you can say, I want to bind the value with two-way binding to last name. And last name and first name here, those are properties on my view model. We will have a look at that later. And you can also bind one way, either from view or to the view. And regarding events, it's works the same way. So in this case, we have the click event on the button, on the HTML button. So either we can use the delegate binding or the trigger binding. And the difference between, I mean, they are more or less exactly the same. The only difference is that when you're using the delegate binding, you get the event sitting very high up in the DOM model. So if you have a for each, which are iterating like 100 buttons, then the delegate binding will only create one function that gets routed to. If you have a .trigger binding, then you get like repeated functions. So this is more efficient way of doing it. So in this case, we are binding to the blur event. So if you know your HTML and you know your HTML attributes, it's very easy to just start using Aurelia and binding from your view model directly to it. And then apart from the attributes that's in normal HTML, you can also use attributes that it's part of the Aurelia framework. So they have added an if attribute, and you can bind that as well. So in this case, it's if bind show message. So if this property on the view model is true, then this div will be displayed. Otherwise, like else, this div element will be displayed. So it's a quite easy and powerful way to hide and remove stuff from your DOM. And it's not just hiding; it's actually removing. So if you open the developer toolbar and look for the elements, you will either have this element or the element below here. You either have this element or the element below here. And you can also import resources you need for your template. So in this case, we are importing this CSS file, which is part of the project. And that means that Aurelia will load the CSS for us and attach it to the DOM. So that's one way of doing it. You could also, since we are building stuff in SPFX, we could use the existing way of using the modules in SPFX as well. I will show you that later when we're looking at the code. But this is a traditional way from Aurelia to load CSS styles into the HTML. There's also a repeat for attribute, and it's quite easy as well. So if you on the view model have an array of friends, in this case the friends array is strings. It repeats for each friends we'll get a friend, and that means that we will get a p tag, and that will bind the friend string out here. So if you have arrays of objects or strings or numbers, you can use the repeat for to display them. So in a typical example would be use Pnp Js to call SharePoint to get a list of documents or a list of lists, and then repeat for the response to display your items. If we look to the view model instead, that we have, it's quite, and that's the point with Aurelia. It's you don't see any specific Aurelia code around. You're not inheriting from a base class or anything. It's just a normal JavaScript or TypeScript class. So we export the class hello, and we put a property on it like first name, last name, and we put all the methods on the class as well. And then we have a corresponding, so if you call this file hello.ts, like for a TypeScript file, we have a corresponding hello.html file, which is the view. So we have the view and the view model, and Aurelia will find them automatically for us. So we don't have to tell Aurelia that the view for this component is hello HTML. It just finds, it knows that it should look for a file called hello.html. And then it's quite easy to create your custom elements. So in this case, we have a class called export class app, and we have added the attribute bindable, and that means that when Aurelia exposed this component to the other components, this first name and last name is bindable. And you see an example on this below here in the app element. So the first name, we bind that to something on that view model, and last name is bound to something called my last name on that view model. So it's very easy to package your functionality and your views into components and then reuse them. And as you see, we are using, the convention is that if you use this casing first with a capital N, then it should use small letters only in HTML, because that's the standard of HTML suggests you should use small names, so it used the dash instead. I think they call it kebab casing or something like that. So part of Aurelia is also dependency injection. So you can Aurelia can automatically inject objects into your classes. So in this case, we import an HTTP client from the Aurelia framework. It could also be the fetch client from Spfx or something similar. And in this case, we use the auto inject attribute. That means that Aurelia framework will look at the constructor and see what objects are required to construct this class, and then it will instantiate those objects for us automatically. There's another attribute you could put here instead, that just say inject, and then just repeatedly say which types you want to inject into the constructor. So this is a common way we do to get to the services. So if we build a Webpart, and the Webpart have one or more services that are talking to the backend layer, we most commonly inject the services into the components. So we have a common service that talks to the backend. And there's lots of more, so I don't think really we have the time to go through everything, but there's a compose element that lets you dynamically bind what's part of, so the inner element of the compose will be what this view model is. So we could have the view model can point to any kind of component, and so if we programmatically change the value of the view model, that will change what's rendered inside the compose element. So you could consider this as some kind of routing mechanism. And we usually use that to sometimes, if we build a wizard or a guide or something, and we want to switch from step 1 to step 2 to step 3, we have the view model point to the different steps. And you also have a router as well, so you can have several routers on the same page if you would like. And but now it's time to show some code, I think. So let's move to command prompt, and if we just start the human generator and we choose the SPFX generator, and we can use SharePoint Online, SharePoint 2019. We actually are running SPFX Aurelia on SharePoint 2016 as well. So if anyone has customers and have problems with that, they can just try to ping me on Twitter or something, and I will help you out on how to get that running. And it's so easy. The first choice is Aurelia, so just choose that. You can add anything you like here. I think jQuery is, you will probably not need jQuery since you're inside Aurelia, but I usually take the highest version of TypeScript. Skip that. Call it PnP2, current folder. So this is just a common scaffolding of the project. I will just select all the defaults and the Webpart hello world description. And then it starts npm install, and it takes a few minutes, as you know. So I will do as everybody hopefully expects me to do. I've already pre-baked that. We start this one and we wrap it up from there. Let's go to the terminal. Let's open a window as well. Sorry. Sorry. So while that is starting up, we can see that no, did I really select it or? Oh yeah, there you have it. And so it looks like any of the normal web parts you have. So this is the similar component, and as you see, we have the message here is part of the view model. So if I save that, it reloads, and we'll get the exclamation mark on that one. And if you give me just 10 seconds, I will move to the next so I can just bring the Fluent UI into it as well. So Discord, check out. So I built this, the Fluent UI is a wrapper on top of all the components that are a part of the normal Fluent UI. So there's Aurelia components for all of them, and there's all the components that are in here are there's a GitHub repository, so you can look at the code there, what it looks like. And so if I use it in here, you see there's here we're using the panel and one of the pickers in here. So it's quite easy to get started with Aurelia and using the Fluent UI from within the SPFX components. So that was a short and quick wrap up and a quick summary of the Aurelia framework tooling.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Very, very cool to see. So our final demo is Perry, who hopefully has regained connections. It looks like he's on the call. Perry, if you want to go ahead and take over the presentation.
Yep, sure. Give me 1 second here. All right, so this SPFX is for feedback. I'm sure you probably have had situations where you had a site page or article sitting somewhere in your tenant and you just wanted to probably gather feedback from your users or something on the home page or whatever. So this is pretty much what this is for. It's an application that supports feedback through a Webpart that can be used directly on a SharePoint site page or home page or pretty much anywhere. This can be added to basically what I just said. And the cool thing about this is it gives you the option to categorize these feedback. And I'll show a quick demo to kind of make that make more sense. And it sends an email to the users inside of the feedback owners. So that will most likely be your admin group or, something like that. And basically they receive an email, and then the user who sends an email also receives an email. It just basically lets them know that, hey, we're going to get back at you. And in future updates, I'm hoping to add probably like a feedback archive. So we save all of these things inside of a list. So just to get to it real fast, because I know we don't have too much time, I created a page, a regular site page. And as you can see, I added this is a vertical, 2 sections. I just did that on purpose because you could basically add it anywhere, right? So I can add it here if I needed to or if I wanted to. And it's literally just a button. And upon click of the button, you get, I've integrated Microsoft Fabric UI's pieces so that I don't have to build stuff from scratch like Hugo mentioned earlier. So I'll show the code real briefly, and you can get an idea of how I handle those kind of things. So it's just as I mentioned, pretty much a simple button, and I'm gonna edit it. And what you can do is the properties are basically what the button should say. So let me just say PnP feedback and categories. As I mentioned, categorizing these feedback articles. Article feedbacks or coming from homepage or whatever. This basically means, for example, if I'm reading a news article and I have this feedback button on there, this is a use case, and I see a typo, I can just select the typo. And this option for the properties, however, is the default because I'm the admin, so I'm setting up the Webpart. So I'm going to set that as general. And then when we add, I'll show you what it will look like on the client side or the user's end. So as you can see, the property text saved in here. So now if I wanted to actually submit feedback for this, the default is set to general because that's what I set it to. And I think it's more than 8 characters. Hello, this is the PnP call. So here we have my categories. So for example, if I found a typo on here, I can leave some feedback to let them know, hey, there's a typo on this page, blah, blah, blah. If this is an article audit, I can't find something. Basically, just create whatever feedback, whatever categories you want so that this is included inside of the email. So it's easier for whoever's sorting things out to be able to kind of, maneuver around quicker. So I'm going to submit this, and I'm currently logged in as Poe. This is Poe Bear, and this is my dev tenant. And I have another login down here I'm about to pull up. This is Chris, who is an admin, who is actually inside of my article feedback owners group. So this is Chris and Perry inside of this group. Clearly, Poe Bear is not in there. So we're going to assume Poe Bear is just a user. And this is the email I just received, 10:54. So hello, this is a PnP call. This is a category that we selected. And this is the email it came from, and this is where the article can be found. So when I click that, opens in a new tab, takes me directly to the article. However, on Poe Bear's end, in his email, he also receives one at 10:55 that basically says the feedback you provided on PnP call, basically the name of the article, or if it's on the home page, it will just let you know that on the home page has been successfully submitted. And this is the text that you included, and this is the article. So this is basically for reference to let them know, hey, we're going to get back at you type of thing. So it's really a simple web part, like I mentioned, and I use a bunch of Fabric UI elements, which helped and eased out the process a lot. For example, this is the dialog mode and modal, and that helped kind of, make things a little more convenient. So I'm just going to delve in here real fast, about 4 minutes. So I'm going to start from the top, and I'm just going to start a render. So when it's rendered, I pass in a bunch of stuff. Sorry, I don't have a cool highlighter like Hugo, but so basically the current user, the list item, and these are all the items that I need in the container to populate the email and whatever's needed in the service layer to make my API calls. So I'm gonna just go right inside of the container. This is where the bulk of the work is. Like I mentioned, this is a dialog modal from the UI Fabric. These are the actual UI Fabric elements I'm using. So I'm using a button, I'm using a panel, I'm also using a dialog. So we come in here and then I create an empty array to save my options. And this options has already been predefined. So if you have this React sample, you would have access to all of this. And my key is just pretty much as simple as what the text is supposed to be. So you can add more to kind of, customize it for your organization's needs, or you can take stuff out or just keep one. How you need at least one in there for this to work. Else it's going to throw a bunch of errors. So this entire block is just to support IE11. .find JavaScript was not working, so that entire block to here was to support that. And in here, I kind of initialize my variables and set my use states, basically empty arrays. This is the page title right here. So as you can see right here, lets you know what article you're working on. So that's what that use state is for. Set the text and then the category value. And use effect down here doesn't have any dependencies. So whenever it re-renders, it's going to run these. And this is on my feedback service layer, basically my API calls. This first one is to get that title I just showed you. And then this get article information is to get the rest of the stuff like the list item, the person who sent it and stuff like that. Just the rest of the things that doesn't come with that title. I could have put both in one call, but I just wanted to separate it out to make things a little more clear. So this is the render, just a bunch of modals from UI, Fabric UI, like I mentioned earlier. And this is my service layer. This is where basically all the magic and all the work happens. This is all my API calls. This is get title, which is called upon render every time because it's in my use effect without any dependencies. And this is also called upon every re-render. So I have my main. My main method is the send email to owner group. This basically does all the work, gets the, actually I'm using Pnp Js. Yep, to get a bunch of stuff. For example, the group that feedback owners. So it's hard coded. So if you change the name, it's in the README, basically what the name should be. So if the name is changed, it has to be changed in the code. And that's one of the biggest caveats that you might want to be looking out for. I set my variables and then basically get all of the users inside of the group. I get the email for all of the users inside of the feedback owners group, and then populate it, get all the information that I need from my REST call, and then I send the email out. And this method on the top of this is the email that gets sent to the user. It's a much shorter one. So it just basically lets them know, hey, we've received your email, and this we're going to get back at you. You can customize the text in here, do whatever that suits your needs. And that's pretty much it. And thank you for watching.
Very cool stuff, Perry. Thank you very much. That is a great demo of some commonly requested functionality and very nicely done. So another great reference for everybody out there in the community. I have this weird calendar invite. There is a PNP Ask Me Anything immediately after this call, so encourage everybody to join us there. Thank you to Hugo, Magnus, and Perry for the demos today. Really outstanding stuff, as always, from the community. Thank you to everybody for joining today. The recording will be available in 24 hours on our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter at Microsoft 365 Dev, M365 PNP. Our next SPFX call is going to be February 25th at the same time, 7 a.m. Pacific. And our next M365 General Dev call will be February 18th. That's next Thursday at 7 a.m. Pacific. You can get all the links to our community calls, aka.ms/M365PNP. So thank you all very much for joining. Here's a whole list of other community calls. If you're interested, check out one or all of these, and pretty sure all of these post their recordings afterwards. So even if you can't make it, you could definitely check out all the great content happening across all these communities. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you for being a part of the community, and look forward to talking soon. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.